Welcome to Duluth Junction Workshop. I'm Tyler. This is Eric. We've had a hard night, but I'm going to try to leverage the lunar eclipse in Scorpio to transmute the pain into opportunity. We were not planning on pulling the engine out. We were trying to do the oil pan gasket, and that kind of necessitated it once we ruined the gasket trying to pull it off. So I need to get this thing back together. It's May 4th. May the 4th be with you. And I have a car show I want to get this to. It's called Intermarque on May 21st. I got a rock on this. I got a couple things in the mail, and we'll see what I can do. Well, we have the engine out. I want to do some engine out service on this thing. We're not going to do any clutch stuff, but I want to get the oil pan gasket done because that was the whole reason for this. I want to repaint the engine, clean things up and make it look nice. And we also want to take the cooling hose things off, the hard coolant lines off. We're going to linseed oil coat those like I did on the F600, and going to generally clean things up and try to get it in a better state here. Then we're going to go in the engine bay and try to get that cleaned up, painted as well, and ready for the engine to go back in with new mounts and everything. I was originally planning on taking this cover off and figuring out why this wasn't working right, but I think if I can find the gears, it seems to be working pretty well. With that mystery unsolved, we're going to move on to the engine here, get all the accessories taken off so we just have an engine here. We can degrease that and then get it ready for paint prep. Since we got the oil pan broken loose earlier, if we wash it right now, we're going to get water in the oil pan. I don't want that. So I'm going to pull the oil pan off first, get that prepped for paint, and then we'll put the gasket on and get everything done as one. Now it's out. After doing the heads in 2020, I knew the engine was pretty clean inside, but look at these marks from rebuilding it or building it. I think this engine was pretty freshly rebuilt when it was parked. I bought this car from my uncle, and he likes to pick up cheap projects and play around with them and then kind of like shove them in the corner. So when he got it from an auto mechanic shop in around like 2001-ish. And what I think happened is I think someone brought it to the shop. They found maybe something wrong with the engine. They sourced a different engine, which is this from 95 or 96. I think they probably rebuilt this engine at the shop, and the owner probably couldn't come up with the money to pay for it. Probably sold the car to the shop as payment for the work, and then the shop owner was like trying to get rid of it to recoup the labor that they put into it. So then I think what happened is my uncle picked it up. He doesn't remember what the whole story was, but I think he picked it up from just a fresh engine rebuild and probably didn't know a whole lot about what was going on there. So I'm really glad to have a clean engine in there, and I hope that we can keep it running very clean. Well, how's the oil pan look? Well, that oil looks pretty good, and I know I changed it pretty recently, but we got this kind of gunk in the bottom here. Should be able to clean it out and have a nice clean pan. I'm not going to take you along for the whole thing. You'll see degreaser happen. But I'm going to take the gasket off here, going to wipe out the inside and get all those kind of chunks out. I'm wondering if those are gasket chunks from trying to get this thing off for so long. Then once it's all cleaned up and the gasket is gone, I got to take this big dent out of here, and I have a body hammer for that. I'm going to go through and basically just sand this whole thing up and get it prepped. And I will get that primed up and go install it in the engine. I've been prepping the engine to degrease the engine itself. What we discovered was, taking the rest of the gasket off here, that it may have been, the oil pan gasket may have been leaking after all. 18 to 24 inches it says. Wow, look at that. The gunk did pretty well in the oil pan, but I think this 3M stuff works a little bit better. So I'm going to keep doing this. It's getting late and dark, but wow. Look at that. This is by no means perfectly clean, but holy crap. Really took that grease off most of these places here. It actually took a lot of paint off too, so I'm ahead in that battle tomorrow, I guess. Well, I brushed out the little crevices with acetone in the brush, got in there with pressurized air. I think it's ready. Now black was not my first choice for a color to use on an engine, but it is the stock color for these cars. They had a black engine and black valve covers, and I don't know. I figured if I'm gonna go do something, I may as well do it the way that it's supposed to be. I gotta admit, I'm getting kind of nervous because the engine has to be in the car has to be driving a week from today for the Intermarque car show, and I'll do a little video there probably too. This is the show that I could not make it to last year because of my fuel sediment issues. So big thing that I want to get to, and I'm kind of nervous. I just gotta keep rocking on this thing, get that engine bay ready, and we'll try to get this thing back on the road as soon as we can. The next step is going to be restoring the engine bay, and we'll get this thing back together in the meantime. I enlisted the Dadster's help, degreasing some parts here, including the engine mount brackets, shifter stuff, that kind of stuff. We got to come in here and pull things out, and then we'll vacuum up all the tiny rocks from the past couple rallies and degrease it, paint strip it, and we'll do pour 15 and a top coat in here. Then it should be ready to throw everything back in. Ugh. Nice. Gross.
Should I paint on that?
Underneath all the grease, maybe. With the engine bay clean, I realized that there's a little crack where some seam sealer is not at the firewall. So I don't want to spray this down and have the water go into the cabin. So we'll lift this thing up and we will remove some of these spacers underneath. Let me get this car a little lower down. Got my engine bay masked off with a painter's plastic, so I think it's time to go in with the degreaser and we'll get some of this grease taken care of. There's a lot of it. I've done 3 coats of the 3M engine degreaser, and you can see how much of this paint is actually not very well adhered anymore. So it's good I'm doing something in here. These shock towers are a real pain in the butt to get to because there's a hole in both sides for the axle, but it's a full box, so you can't really get in very easily. There's a hole here on both sides. Someone tell me what this bracket is for, because I don't know. And then I elected not to pull off the lower control arms. I'm just going to leave them, and we'll see what happens. This is not the perfect engine repaint. In fact, I'm hoping it'll get to actually good. I'm not able to pull everything off. I wish I had time for that, but we're trying to make it a little better than we found it, and I think that'll be okay. So the next thing we're going to do here is we have some paint remover. That's going to strip all the paint off, hopefully. The stripper didn't work out as well as I wanted it to. I left it on for probably like an hour, and it still didn't get this paint off. I had to scrape really hard to get even this far. So I'm going to do it with what I can, and I'm going to use my roll lock to scuff it up, get a little rough in here, get the loose paint off, and we will go and treat it with the degreaser and the metal prep tomorrow. Get ready for pour 15. And very soon we will have these brackets ready to put back on. And once these engine mount brackets go on, of course, we can lift the engine up and throw the oil pan underneath. Here we have our old and new transmission mounts. The old one actually doesn't look too bad now that it's out of the car. But if you look on here, we have stress cracks around the top. We also have a bunch of stress cracks around here. And you can see pretty clearly that this one, the hole is toward the bottom. This one, the hole's more centered. So I think it was kind of compressing on the bottom and stretching on the top. We'll throw this one in and get it going. So one of the tricky things about this is that it has captive nuts. Usually I like captive nuts, but it has to be held in on the back side, and then you have to install the bolts from the engine bay. I'm going to install it with a tool through it so I can set it there on the inside, then I'll pull it out as I start the screws, and I should be able to then tighten the screws up with the tool afterward. I actually ended up using pencils and I just kind of screwed them into the bolt holes. I was able to line it up because there's a little gasket, a rubber gasket between the transmission mount and the firewall. So I can now take my pencil out, hold that tight. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, one thing I absolutely have to do before I go and prep this engine bay is I have to take this hose off. So the hose isn't a problem in itself, except that it's cracked up here. Now this is the hose from the reservoir for the brake cylinder up here. It goes down to the brake cylinder. I love the access points in this car. Pretty nasty, and here's why I'm replacing it. That would not have been good. Got the metal prep on. I took the plastic sheeting off so it doesn't drip on there and get it wet again. And now I'm going to real quick get in here with a heat gun and try to boil out any moisture that's inside the seams in here along the edges. Then I'm going to set the dehumidifier on in the garage and leave this thing for the day. Come back after work and I will throw some seam sealer in. I didn't think there'd be much to report, but it's 8:45. I've been doing this for probably at least an hour and a half. We got in this corner quite a bit on the passenger side, down on the driver's side, and unfortunately, looks like there's some brake fluid down there. I think maybe heating that up may have forced a little fluid out of the clutch master that dripped down. So the car is also tilted a little bit back to make it easier to work on, but I think I'm gonna have to lower it down on the front again so it drains forward and spray some brake clean in there, and that's just how it's gonna go. The thing right now is I have to set boundaries, and I'm trying to get this thing to the show, and I want to get this on the road because a week after the show is a rally I want to do. I think it's a week after. So I got to get this thing back in the road. So I guess the way I'm thinking about it now is I want to stabilize this thing, and I want to hopefully get a coat on tonight. So I want to get this thing ready, throw some Pour 15 down, and if I have to, read a book for a while and come on at 1 a.m. and drink caffeine tomorrow, maybe that's something I have to do because I'm willing to do some stuff to make this thing get on the road for Saturdays. Well, I started with a already open tube of seam sealer. Apparently my dad decided to cut basically half the tip off, like right there. So it came out really, really thick, but I got it in and I think it'll be fine. I'm probably gonna be in here again in the winter and redo it, so we'll move on. The time has come. It's about 11:40 at night on a Tuesday. We're gonna put some Pour 15 on this engine bay. I did paint this at about midnight, and then I went to bed, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and came and did a second coat, and it looks terrible. Honestly, the surface finish is horrible. We got brush strokes everywhere, and it's gloppy and ugly, but I think it's gonna work. I did miss a couple little pieces here, so I put some engine paint on there. I think this thing is gonna be just fine for the rest of the year. It could probably last a couple of years, but we're gonna leave it. We're gonna say that's done, and we're planning on getting that engine in there tonight. It's Wednesday night and it's the golden hour. We're making some good progress on this. What have you got going on over here?
Putting the shift linkage back together on Jack Ashcraft's blog. He recommended to put a Zerk in here so we can lubricate this shaft that goes in here for the shifter.
These are 2 bronze bushings, right?
Correct, on each end.
Those
yep.
typically wear out. Ours aren't too
Still
bad.
a little bit of slack there, but
probably use some new ones, but it's
Yeah.
going back in. And that'll allow us to lubricate it even if it's not out of the car.
correct.
I got the initial timing down on the engine last night. I put it to about 7.5 degrees, I think. Remember to put that in. Sometimes you need to use a little 1/4-inch hex screwdriver to turn the oil pump shaft till it lines up, and then the distributor will slot in. But if you don't do that, you're gonna have a hell of a time getting that in. We got that. We got our little timing marks painted up, and yeah, it's looking pretty good. Throwing a little paint on the exhaust donuts and on the driver's side downpipe as well, so it looks a little bit nicer in the engine bay. Now I'm going to tackle the oil pan, throw that on. So we got a couple interlocking oil pan gaskets that we're going to go over here. For our oil pan installation, first thing you want to do is take this rear main bearing cap seal. We want to set that in. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this while the engine is upright, but we're going to give it a shot. Like it doesn't want to fit properly in there. Well, I tried to put that seal over the rear main bearing cap and it will not stay. It wants to fall off all the time. So we have to figure out a way to get the engine inverted for gravity. So I think we're going to try to hang this thing up by the engine mounts and see if we can get it kind of upright. We got the Jiffy Jacks reinforced. We're going to still take it really easy here. Maybe if I lift this and you push the cart, is it okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Tell me if you're okay.
Go. Do you want to grab this and help me? Okay, down. That's lovely. Okay? All right. Oh, that was sketchy. We got this thing hanging here. It is not the most confidence inspiring, but I think it's gonna be okay. So now we got this thing on a slight angle. Everything should hold well enough. And I can see that I have a little bit of gasket to clean up in here. That's good. I was able to get this up. We also have a little bit of stuff on the oil pan pickup, or the oil pump pickup. We are first instructed to install this rubber seal in the groove of the rear main bearing cap. This has a little arrow, it's pointing that way, so we know that the engine turns this way. So I'm going to do that in the direction of the engine turning. Hope I'm right about that. If you're doing this like this, I noticed there was a lot of oil that pooled up in this corner and that was leaking down into where the seal goes. So if you dab up that oil with a Q-tip, you'll be in better shape. All right. Apply a coat of sealing compound to the 2 corner joints where the transmission, the intermediate plate, and the edges of the oil pan meet. Then you're supposed to insert these ends into the keyed holes in the rubber. You can see that kind of smush in. That's, I guess, what her sealant does. There are little things that you can put on here that you screw into the holes and then it'll hold the oil pan on. I couldn't find them in time, so I'll put the link in the description for the little alignment tools that you can buy. All right, last step, we gotta put this thing on. Okay, now I'm gonna start throwing a little tiny bit of thread locker on here. So these two bolts with the rubber washers go on the passenger side of the engine. They're gonna be fun to put in. 3.5 foot-pounds. I don't know what that is, but it's not much. There we go. We got all the bolts on. I torqued them once. I torqued them twice. They're all marked with a dot for the ones I touched, and I touched them all. So at this point we have an upside down engine and transaxle. Neither of them have oil in them. And we have a car that needs a fuel line. Okay, we are going to try to do a quick bait and switch to put the fuel line back on. Okay, that's out. So here's the setup on here. We're kind of flummoxed by the different fittings and stuff here. We got a new grommet on the firewall. That's a 3/4 inch. Got new hose here, and that's regular vapor hose. Little tiny clamps. And into here we use the same metal clips in there, or retainers, but we put a little tiny piece of this hose in here. So that replaces the old style. This is what it had in there before. It's kind of a dedicated insulator, but we figured the fuel hose fits perfectly and it'll be replaceable and all that stuff. So that's what we use for those two. Got a little crap there already. And this one is the thing that was in there. It's some kind of insulator standoff. You could also use fuel hose there too, I think, just a section of it. Again, there we got a new P-clamp with the fuel hose underneath it, and then our hose that goes up to the fuel pump. Now we got the battery cable in the original clamp there as well, and that'll run up. And I think that's all we have to do for the bottom here. Of course, you can see our new barricade hose for the brake reservoir. That's all good. We don't have to worry about the clutch one because I put the Austin Healey clutch master in, so we don't have a reservoir for that. Otherwise, I think we're ready to put the, what do you call them? Engine mounts in. Yeah. Oh, we also have to put that one shifter grommet in there. I could not find a replacement in the NAPA system. There might be one in O'Reilly's or Advance or something, but they all use Dorman. So good luck with that. I'm looking for good used ones, and we'll see. If you have one, let me know. It's the fateful day. Let's stick this thing in. All right, what are we gonna do here? We're gonna flip this thing up, hook it on the tail, right?
Yeah.
Hook it on where this is. Trust that.
Oh, hang on. I'm on the...
Fuck.
You're gonna have to crank it up. I got it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we need to lower the back of that transmission down just a little bit. We're doing pretty well here. We got the rear end with the shifter. It's almost touching the floor, but we got plenty of room up by the oil pan. So we're gonna drop the front end down a little bit now. We should be able to get that thing leveled out and fit under that steering rack there. That's the main issue. So what's happening here is the shaft in the back is too low to go into the transmission mount, and no matter which way we go, we can't raise it in the back because it's hitting the steering rack, and we can't lower it in the front because it's hitting the cross member. So I don't know how they install I guess you have to pull the steering rack to do this properly,
yeah.
Which is not going to happen today. Okay. Sweet. We got it. How'd it go? What do you think?
Tired. If we would have taken that front cross member off, we would have saved 20 minutes.
What time is it?
11:30.
Still time for ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah, so even with all the work we did and all this, it's only a 1/4 inch away from the transmission, which is insane. And then down here, the cross member is insanely tight here. Next time I do this, especially if I have a real engine hoist, I think I would pull the steering rack next. And I think that is going to come when I do the full suspension restoration, so I'll have to pull the tie rod ends anyway, and it'll be a good time to do all that.
And the steering rack should come out easier than the first time. You had a lot of trouble getting it off the steering column, didn't you?
Oh yeah, the shaft in there was insanely difficult to pull. So I guess we're going to call it a night for tonight. The goal was to put the engine physically in the car. We accomplished that. And tomorrow, we got to make this thing drivable so I can drive it to work on Friday. It's been a really aggressive timeline on this, and even when we started to do that rally thing, if we would have known all this was happening, I don't know if I would have thought we were going to do it.
Right.
Of course, we're not done yet, but it is Wednesday night. The engine is in the car, and everything else I think should be pretty straightforward. So let's jump to tomorrow, and we'll get everything reassembled, see if we can take this thing for a test drive. All right, it is Thursday night. The show is on Saturday morning, like 8 a.m. I am nearing the end of my rope for sleep deprivation on a longer term. I think it's been 3 or 4 days where I haven't gotten the sleep that I wanted. So what we're trying to do tonight is we have the engine in from last night. We're trying to get this thing on the road so I can drive it to work tomorrow and work out any bugs that might have popped up after this huge list of work that we've done. We got Dad installing the hard coolant lines in here. He did some rust fix on these things, I think, so they're a little bit stabilized from not rusting so much. What are you looking at now?
Trying to figure out all these miscellaneous, tons of little hoses on this car.
It looks like I helped you out with some labeling here.
Yeah,
right?
I figured that out, but
yeah,
I'm short 2 clamps.
I'm short all the time. So these are the inlets to the engine block in the back, so that goes as little tiny pieces of hose. We got 2 hard lines coming out the water pump. One goes to heater hoses and the thermostat. One comes back, goes around the other side of the engine. We got a hard line coming up here. It is a mess, and it's not intuitive. It makes no sense, and it's not well organized. So yeah, pretty fun. Over here, I'm going to concentrate on putting the axles and knuckles back in and getting this thing back on its wheels. Let's continue on that stuff. I didn't realize last night, but here's something I realized. We were trying really hard to lift this thing in really weird ways. I think these holes in the heads right here are what is actually used for lifting the engine. So if you put a eye bolt in there or something, that you could lift from both sides on the heads and not worry about hitting stuff. So next time I'll have to do that. One of the really fun things that we're dealing with as we put this thing back together was the coolant temperature sensor. And this wire was literally about 5 different pieces. It came from yellow to black to blue, and then back to black, and then I'm sure there was something else that I'm missing. I actually pulled the end of it straight out of the butt connector it was in because it was not done very well. So let's get another spade terminal here, and we'll put a single piece of wire from the yellow one all the way up into that coolant temp sensor. Got the new wire on here with uninsulated butt connectors with heat shrink over them. Wrapped it around so it doesn't flop around. New spade connector on the end. I declare that unhinkified. On the other end of the engine bay, we have the boots put back on with new CV grease in there. We got the pinch clamps on both sides. It's cleaned up pretty nice, and I've got the knuckles all put on. I'm working on finding this last bolt for my caliper, and then after that goes on, the wheels can pop onto here. And of course, it is Sonett, so all the hose clamps have to be put on very strategically. All the ones down there have to be pointed the exact right way so that you can get a screwdriver in from here, here, here. So you have to think 3 steps ahead on everything you do here to make sure that you can service it in the future.
That's because of the clamshell, you don't have access.
Clamshell, and it's just ridiculously tight in there. Cool. It's supposed to be easier to install this time. We'll see if that's true. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to have a V-band under the driver's side. This is ridiculous. So now before we did that, we made sure that the V-band was close on this side. Close. Now that these are started over here, I'm gonna try to line this one up, clamp the V-band together, and then we can tighten up the nuts on there. We got our donut in here. The flange is on while it's started. This side is started. Are we gonna try to tighten this thing up tonight? Because we can't do anything else. This is not gonna be in a drivable condition tonight.
No.
Gotta bleed the clutch. We gotta fill fluids on everything. We gotta install a radiator, a bunch of lines. Anyway, what I'm thinking is probably just call it a night, get a good night's sleep, and hopefully finish this thing up tomorrow. I mean, we got the exhaust on, which is the big thing. Unfortunately, the V-band did not help that much. I think once we get this on the right angle on the head, I think the exhaust will go on a lot easier next time, but it's way too big of a single piece still. Well, I just got home, and it looks like my dad's been busy today on his day off. Well, he got the rear wheels on. He got the muffler hung, which is a fun job. And then he got the exhaust torqued up on the headers. Got the coolant lines hooked up, and got the oil filter on. What else did you do today? Radiator on.
Light bracket.
Driving light bracket.
Grounding
Yep.
strap. Distributor.
All right, and now you're working on this weird NICOP line over here.
Yeah,
What's that
the
for?
oil pressure line.
Yeah, because the oil pressure gauge in the car was leaking. He's installing the gauge kit. I'm gonna go around torque the lug bolts. I'm gonna check all the hose clamps, all 83 of them, and we will see how everything's going. Looks like the exhaust is still hitting the chassis down there. I may have to leverage the chassis out of there a little bit.
The muffler's hitting the floor pan in the back.
What?
Is this twisted?
Shit. It's about time to put fluids in this car, so I wanted to go over this in case anyone's curious or looking for what to use in their own car. I am not sponsored by anyone, but I do work at NAPA, so I get a good discount. I use normal .3 brake fluid. I have a NAPA 1515 gold filter. This is a Wix brand, or Wix made filter, and this is compatible with basically all Ford engines from the 60s and 70s. I use this on my 352 FE engine. I use it on my 262 inline 6 and the F600, and the Saab takes it, but just barely. You kind of have to work to get it in and out. As for oil, I'm going to use something high zinc because we do have a flat tappet camshaft, and we are going to use AMSOIL Z-Rod. Z-Rod is formulated for classic cars, has a lot of zinc in it, it's supposed to fight corrosion during storage, and it's guaranteed for 5,000 miles or 2 years. So we got some of that. Also I've been using the 7590 manual transmission fluid from AMSOIL because I had a hard time finding a GL4 transmission fluid that was close to the right specs. I know there are a lot of opinions about Saab V4 transmission fluid, but this is what I'm using, and I've been pretty happy with it so far. Here's my coolant. I'm using extended life because it has the minerals, vitamins and minerals to help the stave off corrosion in the engine as well, and distilled water to mix with that so I don't have weird mineral deposits. Anyway, that's just kind of the quick and dirty on this. Let's throw these in and work on some other stuff. Some of you may be happy to know that the NAPA brake fluid and the coolant is made in the USA. The AMSOIL is made in Superior, Wisconsin, which is only a couple hours from here. And one last thing, the transmission fluid, you're supposed to have a dipstick because the fill hole is too low, sometimes people say. So this is something made up from a Tom Donney plan. And if you want the link for that, I'll try to include that in the description too if you want to make your own out of, I don't know what this is. Housing, flashing from a window, I think. Things are going pretty well with the oil that just went in. I threw some water in there so we can flush out the old green coolant. But we have an issue. I think when I was in the back and using the heat gun to get water out, I burnt the brake fluid. We were bleeding the clutch slave cylinder and I realized the brake fluid is all dark, so I figure I better bleed out that, add new stuff till it comes out clear, and then do the same to the front brake calipers. Make sure that all the fluid is in good shape. We'll get those taken care of, and then there's a special procedure for this VHT header paint that you're supposed to run on and off certain amounts of time. Let's do that a little bit while we flush that coolant through. And then I think we'll have to bleed the coolant out of the heater core and the radiator. After that's all done, I think we can throw the clamshell on tonight. All right, I have decided to leave water in the cooling system because we're running out of time and I want to get this done. It's summer anyway. No coolant? We got coolant. No oil? We got oil. No fuel? Well, I think I got fuel. I've got the ignition preset to about 7 degrees. I got a little bit of fuel in the carb bowl. We have to do a procedure to harden up that very high temperature header paint. So we got to run it for 10 minutes, let it sit for 20, run it for 20, let it sit for 20, and then drive it normally for 30, and then it's all cured. So I want to set up my timing light, make sure that is correct right off the bat. We can tune the carburetor after that. It's in neutral. Yep. Clutch in. Yep. Start it. Nope. I thought this thing was gonna pop off. What the crap?
We didn't do anything that was not...
We just unhooked every single thing on the engine. Strong spark. I'm going to set it up to TDC here, and then I'm going to turn the distributor 180. All right, my rotor is set 180 degrees off on the distributor, so we couldn't think of anything else to do.
Ready?
Yeah. That sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
Give her a couple pumps. There we go. Shut her off. I guess I was 180 off. No fucking shit it's missing. Why don't we plug all the plugs in? That sounds better. After so long, it runs. Finally, got the timing set right. It's smoking pretty good here with the paint curing. So we'll let it run for 10 minutes. I want to check the coolant, and we'll do the whole paint curing procedure. Well, no oil leaks. Maybe it was the oil pan gasket. That's good news for now. Before, when I was running this thing, it would be dripping right now on the ground. So far good on that. I do notice there's a lifter tick on the passenger side. The brake lights don't work as I predicted, so I think I'll have to get in the garage and clean up those green crusties on the brake light switch that I got when I was cleaning the corner off with degreaser. We're gonna go and enjoy ourselves tonight. Probably watch a little YouTube and drop screwdrivers on the ground. I'll get up early, we'll put the clamshell on tomorrow, and we'll go. Got up at 6 a.m. this morning. We got the hood and the bonnet on. We got this thing out the garage. I'm gonna head out to Intermarque and we'll see how it goes. Press on. Good news, everybody, it paid off. We're here. I got a classic 900, I think SPG turbo, and then Jack's Sonett. Good deal. Just a little epilogue here. I wanted to go over some issues that I had with the car. It did break down once on the way to the show, and it broke down once when I was trying to leave the show. And I ended up getting together with my friend Taylor and his friends. We're poking around this thing and figured out what the issue was. It was a break in continuity from the wire from the condenser to the coil. So what happened was there was a little something happened inside the old wire. The old wire wasn't connected to electricity anymore. And so we just unplugged that and plugged the condenser wire directly into the coil. Car ran beautifully all the way home. So thank you so much, Darren and Richard, for helping me out on this. Also, shout out to Simon, a new viewer, who found my video from last Intermarque and came and he said, "Hey, you got it running!" So yes, I got it running. It's awesome. So thank you all for watching, and press on.